Now starting our second media briefing. This time is for the Department of Transport. I'm still assisted by Ishmael on the telephone lines and Nongeba on the WhatsApp. And on the sign language, I'm assisted by Andiswa and Keta. In the panel today is the Minister of Transport, Minister Fikile Mbalula, and the Deputy Minister, Dikelezi Makatsi, and the Director General of Transport, Alec Muremi. At this point, I'd like to invite the Minister to come and address the media briefing.
Thank you, Director General, for our communications and GCIS, Ms. Pumla Williams, and congratulations on your new appointment of that important position in our government. With, like Ms. Pumla said, with the DG, Mr. Alec Muemi. They call him Muremi because he was ramming in the Free State. But he's from Limpopo, Seshego, the proud talent of Seshego in Limpopo, a man in the province of Dzingidzingi. And then I'm with also the Deputy Minister, Ms. Dikeledi Makatsi, also from Limpopo. So this is Limpopo time in the Department of Transport. Ladies and gentlemen and viewers at home, in this address to the nation on the Sunday, President Ramaphosa announced that alert level for the whole country will be lowered from level 4 to level 3 with effect from 1 June 2020. The President further emphasized that we must get used to living with the coronavirus for some time to come. We must therefore internalize the new normal. We have consistently emphasized that working with civil society, with our people in general, we will redouble our efforts in ensuring that the transport sector is not responsible for the rapid spread of the virus. As the country moves to level 3, with more industries resuming operations, learners returning to school, the transport sector must be responsive to enable mobility of both workers and learners. We must at all times remember that this is a government readjusted approach that the President talked about from level 5, which was the total shutdown. We're moving downwards. So on a risk by risk analysis, we will then shift to different levels as we go on. And at all times, transport and all other ministries affected will have to make adjustments in this regard. In doing so, we must maintain a delicate balance between enabling mobility and arresting the spread of the virus. Our commitment to preservation of human life, above all else, is informed by our Constitution, which enjoins us in ensuring that the right to life is non-negotiable and therefore supersedes all other rights. The consultation we have held with industry bodies across various modes of transport have given us confidence that the majority of the sector is ready to resume operations with strict adherence to health protocols. Regulations published by the Minister of Cooperative Governance, which give effect to level 3, enjoins us to publish directions responsive to the gradual easing of the lockdown. The Minister of COCTA, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, is leading the process in regard to the regulations and in particular the disaster management in our country. And in doing so, she's not working alone. She's working with an interministerial committee that report to the National Coronavirus Command Council led by the President. And then the Command Council is accountable to Cabinet. None of the decisions and regulations we publish and the directions I'm going to speak to today are without the rubber stamp of Cabinet of the Republic. The reopening of the schools and some institutions of higher learning in June require of us to put measures in place to enable safe movement of learners and students. Similarly, the increase in the number of people returning to work means more activity on our roads. Our level 3 directions, which come into effect on the 1st of June 2020, demonstrate the careful balancing act of enabling mobility while arresting the spread of the virus through the transport system. We have taken note of adversaries from the World Health Organization and the Department of Health discouraging the use of sanitizing booths due to health concerns. We will ensure that these are not utilized at our transport facilities. There are booths that have been advertised all around, and we in transport also, we have tested some of the booths which we wanted to use for convenience and new innovation as we roll out safety measures in transport centers in our country. The Department of Health, informed by the World Health Organizations, have informed us that it is not safe to use the booth in South Africa and the world over. So tough luck to those people who thought that is business. And so in this particular regard, they will have to look at other new means of innovation. Maritime transport, there will be no changes to the directions regulating the movement of ships. The ban on passenger vessels and cruise liners remain in place, and only vessels bringing in cargo are allowed to call on our ports. However, it is important to note that movement of cargo from our seaports to its final destination is allowed. Similarly, full operations for the Port of Mossel Bay and Port of Saldanha Bay for movement of cargo will be permitted. Furthermore, allowance will be made for South African registered seafarers to embark and disembark ships with mandatory quarantine for those returning. To this extent, the South African Maritime Safety Authority, SAMSA, shall be directed to issue a marine notice to this effect. Aviation. Limited domestic air travel for business purposes will be allowed, subject to restrictions on the number of flights per day and authorization based on the reason for travel. The availability of port health services will also guide the scheduling of flights. The resumption of domestic flights will be rolled out in 3 phases. This phased approach will be guided by the following considerations: port health capacity at the Golden Triangle airports. The Golden Triangle airports is OR Tambo, Cape Town, and Kinshasa International Airport. Initial period will also serve as a trial period to stress test the system and measures to determine if they are holding up or not. Lanseria Airport to arrange port health capacity and government to certify it before any flight is allowed to take off or land. We will, in this regard, work closely with management of this privately owned airport to ensure that all the necessary measures are in place. A move to phase 2 is informed by the current low infection rates in the inland provinces. We will further engage with the industry stakeholders on the contributions that are necessary for port health capacity in the operations of phases 2 and 3 of the rollout. What it means is that the limited service will be provided in a triangular golden airports, which is OR Tambo, Cape Town International Airport, as well as Kinshasa. The rest of the smaller airports, pending on the capacity there, that will be rolled out in terms of port health. They will follow soon, probably at phase 2 of the rollout. And they'll be guided by the considerations of commercial aircraft movement. Also will be allowed from these airports during each phase. On phase 1, OR Tambo Airport, Kinshasa, and Cape Town Airport, Lanseria International will be open. Phase 2, Kruger Mpumalanga International, Polokwane, and Bramfisher Airport will follow. Phase 3, Kimberley Airport, Uppington, East London Airport, Umtata, Port Elizabeth will follow at phase 3 of the opening up of the airlines. Guidelines to prevent the spread of the virus in civil aviation activities have been developed by the South African Civil Aviation Authority, and this will be implemented by the industry, with SACA playing an oversight role. We have evaluated the plans in full and have also considered the non-pharmaceutical interventions as well as mitigation strategies to be implemented by all airlines operating in our domestic markets, and are confident that they will assist in the containment of the spread of the virus. We have also assessed the measures being rolled out globally in the airline industry and benchmarked against this when an assessment was done by the Department of Transport on the state of readiness related to the aviation industry. Airports' limited domestic air travel also means that flights will only be allowed to depart and land at selected airports in a phased manner, as earlier explained. Only passengers will be allowed inside the terminal buildings. Therefore, no accompanying members of the public will be allowed inside the terminal buildings. Temperature screening will be conducted at the terminal building entrances before any passenger is allowed entry. We had envisaged booths and so on. Now, with the intervention of WHO and the Department of Health, there will be no booths, but there will be strict adherence to measures. When you go to OR for business purposes to board a flight, you will be checked, and if there are anything that suggests otherwise, you will be taken care of accordingly in terms of the health measures of our country by port health. Just a point of emphasis, there's no need to go to airport to accompany anybody except if you drop off and then not enter the airport. So this thing of accompanying friends all round, and whilst you are not boarding the flight, for now, it is not ideal for anyone going to the airport. No passengers will be allowed inside the terminal buildings without masks. So all the time, you've got to have your mask on. AXA will ensure effectiveness of the sanitization process before entering the terminal buildings, which may result in the number of entrances being reduced. All the airports will have markings on the floor for social distancing of 1.5 meters. This will be applicable at check-in counters, security checkpoints, and airport lounges. All airline check-in agents will wear face shields, and the counters will be installed with protective screens. Check-in counters will also be frequently sanitized. All airport personnel will wear masks. Passengers are encouraged to use self-check-in to avoid queues at the airports. At boarding gates, boarding will be staggered and prioritized in terms of the number of passengers to board. Sectional boarding will be implemented to avoid unnecessary contact inside the aircraft. Inside the cabin, full capacity will be allowed. It must be noted that the risk of COVID-19 infection on board a commercial passenger airline is lower than in many other confined spaces. All our commercial aircrafts are fitted with high efficiency particulate air filters. It's something that I had during this week for the first time. But to explain it to you, it HEPA, it eat all the viruses, not only corona, any virus inside the aircraft. HEPA, finito. So there is HEPA. So don't compare airlines with taxis. So that we can have 100%. Let's be clear. HEPA is for airlines. Okay? Taxis, mask, and all of that. So quickly, there will be experts who are going to say, taxi and airline same. Go and ask Santaco. Their airline did not take off. So they will explain that better about this. So I'm just clarifying the point that be clear that 100% inside the airline, and then HEPA, high efficiency particulate filters, will be inside the airlines, all our airlines. These are manufactured to the same standard as those used in hospital operating theaters and industrial clean rooms, with the same efficacy of 99.97% in removing viruses. While the total air supply inside the cabin is essentially sterile and particle-free, the biggest risk is if someone enters or remains in that environment while unwell with a viral infection. This risk will be mitigated through the adoption of effective sanitization and personal hygiene protocols. Somebody gets into the airline, he's got coronavirus, he doesn't know. He passes the screen and the screen says he's pashasha, he's okay. But the guy is sick, he doesn't know. That will be mitigated by masking yourself inside, and then the HEPA, as well as other measures, sanitization and so on. It is quite possible that you can sit in the presence of people who've got coronavirus, but they might not know, or you yourself, you will not know. And that is why we are encouraged when we get into spaces where you get to be in contact with people, you've got to take those measures very seriously. Very seriously. That is very important. The following measures will apply inside the cabin of the aircraft. No catering will be allowed inside the cabin. No magazines on board. Sawubona is gone. The last row will be reserved for isolation of suspected cases. You go around, we don't understand you. The last row at the back next to the toilets is reserved for you, right there. But it's important so that you are there and you are kept and you are attended accordingly. Or if you're not feeling well, that last row will be reserved for people and they will be taken care of accordingly. All aircrafts must be disinfected before entering into service and after each flight. Loading capacity for all airport buses will be limited to 70%. These buses must be disinfected after loading. Drivers, baggage handlers, and round handlers must be fully equipped with appropriate personal protective equipment. On arrival, all passengers must be screened as they enter the terminal building. Suspected cases must be referred to Port Health. The reason why we've got the triangular approach, you must understand, of Joburg, Cape Town, and Kinshasa is because all the other smaller airports don't have the Port Health capacity. So to open them up without that capacity is a total disaster. They will be opened up as and when we roll that capacity out and we do stress testing through these airports, because there are questions that will arise. Cape Town is an epicenter, Johannesburg and Durban. Why do you allow this to happen and then you don't allow flying in smaller airports? This is guided also by capacity, but we'll explain further as and when questions arise. On arrival, all passengers must be screened as they enter the terminal building. Suspected cases must be referred to Port Health. Aviation training. Aviation training organizations are allowed to conduct both virtual and in contact aviation training to students that are South African citizens and to foreign students that are ready in South Africa, subject to all applicable COVID-19 regulations and directions. Foreign students who are not within the borders of South Africa are allowed to only conduct virtual training. Additional authorization for training flights is not required, provided that the aircraft used is registered with an approved Part 141 Aviation Training Organization. Skills tests are allowed, provided that the examiner or instructor is authorized to conduct a flight test by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. General aviation operators will be required to develop and implement procedures consistent with applicable COVID-19 regulations and directions. Rail. When we presented level 4 directions, we indicated that commuter rail will resume operations gradually on an incremental basis based on detailed plans submitted by operators. Indeed, the Gautrain resumed its operations at the beginning of May 2020. As of 1st June 2020, the Gautrain will resume the airport service. Through our ongoing engagements and evaluation of PRASA's state of readiness to resume operations, we have concluded that PRASA is not ready to resume with the Metro Rail commuter services. We continue to work closely with PRASA in assessing each line and put measures in place to achieve an acceptable level of readiness. We have therefore revised our timelines in respect of the resumption of the Metro Rail commuter service. The revised target date is now 1st July 2020 on the following lines: Pretoria to Pienaarspruit, Cape Town to Simonstown, East London to Berlin, and Port Elizabeth to Uitenhage. Long distance trains remain prohibited. On public transport, we will answer further questions you may want to ask about PRASA. We do have plans which we have evaluated and we have looked at, like we do with all our sectors, maritime and as well as aviation. PRASA was ready to go on Monday, but we can't take that risk because you know there are thousands and thousands of commuters who depend on that. But equally, the numbers of people going to work, as much as they increase, they are not full 100%, so to say. So it has enabled us in terms of our planning to ensure that we utilize June to be ready, and at the same time, we are confident that from July 1st, PRASA will be back on operations in those lines that I've actually explained. There is no time that we can allow people to be on top of each other. Omunye pos gomunye. That's not going to allow, because otherwise we will be opening a service simply to become a vehicle for spreading the virus. We can't allow that. So we have done this in the best interest of safety to ensure when we resume, we've got all the ingredients and the capacity necessary for us to guide the operations. And I'm confident that the 1st of June, we will be up to speed. On public transport, with the increase in the number of people returning to work and learners and students returning to institutions of learning, long-distance public transport crossing provincial, metropolitan or district boundaries is permitted to operate. The condition for such operation is that public transport vehicles are only permitted to transport persons permitted to travel between provinces in terms of the regulations. Such travel is only restricted to persons undertaking work responsibilities or performing a service permitted under Alert Level 3, provided they are in possession of the requisite permit. Persons moving to a new place of residence, persons caring for an immediate family member, learners or students who have to commute to and from those schools or institutions of higher learning during periods when those schools or institutions are permitted to operate. A practical example of that, it is Mpumalanga, KwaMhlanga, and Mamelodi Atwane. It's an interprovincial travel daily. So at the present moment, it is not allowed. So we're allowing that travel for people who are coming for school and at the same time going to work, and that interprovincial travel is allowed, not for visiting. If you want to visit your uncle and everybody, that is discouraged, only for purposes of work and business. That interprovincial travel will happen. So if police stop the taxi on the road and you are found to be traveling and you don't have a permit, you will then face the consequences of being offloaded, whatever that it is, because you will have been in direct contravention of the regulations. Interprovincial will be allowed for attendance of funerals, transportation of mortal remains, obtaining medical treatment, persons returning to their place of residence from a quarantine or isolation facility, movement of children, and members of parliament performing oversight responsibilities. The time restrictions on all road-based public transport modes are lifted. Public transport will now be allowed to operate throughout the day. However, capacity restrictions remain. Minibus taxis remain at 70% loading capacity. Buses must adhere to a maximum loading capacity of 50%, taking due regard of standing passengers. E-hailing and meter taxis remain at 50% loading capacity. Shuttle, chauffeur, and charter services remain at 50% loading capacity. Driver's license testing centers, vehicle testing centers, and provincial regulatory entities. All driver's license testing centers, DLTCs, vehicle testing centers, VTCs, and provincial regulatory entities. You will have seen during the week I was showcasing the safety measures that will be taken this coming week in terms of the opening of the DLTCs. And the VTCs and the DLTCs have been conducting safety measures for all these centers throughout the country in preparation for the 1st of June. And I visited one of such centers in Centurion to showcase how the safety measures are going to be applied in the DLTCs and VTCs as they open on Monday. Subject to strict application of health norms and standards and their ability to pass the assessment on their state of readiness test conducted by the Road Traffic Management Corporation. In conclusion, we remain guided by the risk-adjusted approach of government and have taken a cautious approach to the measures easing the lockdown effects on transport. We will further continue with our engagement with the stakeholders, which we have done with all the stakeholders, with the exception, of course, of truck owners, which we will extend to over time in terms of engagement to find solutions to the difficult task at hand of balancing the competing interests and preservation of lives and supporting livelihoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. At this point, we'll take questions, and I will start with Ishmael from the telephone line.
Thanks, DG. At the moment, we don't have any callers.
Okay. Ngaba from the WhatsApp line.
Thank you, DG. We have... Oh, sorry. Thank you, DG. We have one so far. Well, one journalist who sent 3 questions. It's from Lindo Kuhle from ENCA. He's asking, what is the plan for people who depend on PRASA, given that they are not ready to open? He's also asking, how are you going to make sure that public transport keeps to the rules and restrictions? We know the body sanitizer has been taken away at Rea Vaya bus stops. Isn't this supposed to be mandatory? And lastly, can sports bodies travel to non-hotspots to play or to resume play since they can't play in hotspot areas?
That's it. Okay.
There's another one. DG, can I continue? It's from Nokukanya, and she's asking, last night, Health Minister Zweli Mkhize said there is no scientific evidence supporting the use of human tunnels to disinfect or sanitize people, and that if anything, the chemicals might be harmful. One, can you please tell us how you had arrived at authorizing the use of these tunnels at taxi ranks and train stations? And secondly, will you be issuing directives for the discontinued use of these tunnels? Unrelated to the above, from the same person, can we get an update on talks with the taxi industry? Has the department managed to establish a relief fund for those impacted by reduced operations? And the last question, DG, is from Thomas Litoba from News. It was a news editor at Kasi Voice Media. Minister spoke about permitted transportation of goods. Can you clarify if people will be permitted to travel from a province to collect goods from another province?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Over to you. Oh.
You will start out
Okay.
and the DM, you can add as well.
Oh, you answer from there, yeah?
Yes, we'll answer from here.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Yes.
after the soccer match interview. So there it was ministerial. DG.
Arabo, wait.
Thank you, DG, Minister and Deputy Minister. The question about interprovincial travel by Thomas Litova of whether people can travel between provinces to collect goods, I think maybe must be put into context, because the you are not talking personal luggage that a person carries. You are actually talking transportation of goods, meaning that either it's a buggy or it's a truck or whatever it is to in between provinces. The current regulations allow for business travel interprovincially, and in any case, logistics companies have already been doing work in respect of this matter of moving goods between one province to the other. And even from deliveries point of view, this has been done already. So the answer then is a yes. But the question of whether, because I also know that there are people who are small entrepreneurs who do not have a buggy nor anything and use public transport. They move from one province to the other and go to a market or a store to go buy some things that they also carry along with them inside public transport to travel to the next province. If it is purely for that purpose, for business purposes, and you have an interprovincial travel permit, yes, certainly you can travel between the two to obtain your wares and your goods that you require in that regard. I hope that will answer that question. The issue of tunnels, no one has all the answers, and the disease is a new disease. A lot of research is being done globally about this matter, and the body of knowledge grows every day. And as we move along and we get to be clearer about certain things and we get to know more about other things, we also adjust our regulations and adjust our intervention and mitigation measures to keep up with the time. I'm sure that you would recall that in level 5, in the maritime space, we had taken a decision that we will sanitize all cargo that comes from high-risk areas. That was one of our main mitigation measures, that cargo coming from the listed countries by World Health Organization as being in high risk and also having a lot of infections was to be sanitized. But as research went on and we began to understand the lifespan of a virus on surfaces, and new research and body of knowledge came up to show that it would not survive lengthy journeys in the seas and the open seas and with cargo. We moved away from the requirement and we saved ourselves some money of sanitizing cargo that we know that having been in the open seas and having traveled for this long, by the time it arrives at our ports, the virus will no longer be.
Thanks.
Okay. The virus will no longer be alive by the time it arrives at our ports, and we have since adjusted those regulations to meet up with the requirements of what we are faced up with right now. So even with the sanitization tunnels, or the human tunnels as they are being called, we had piloted this, we had looked at it, and we had other laboratories that have tested not necessarily alcohol-based sanitization, but other chemicals, lighter mixtures of peroxides and all of that. We had considered that, and we said let's pilot and let's test, because this, up until the World Health Organization issued its advisory, had been rolled out globally and not just here in our country. And we're still at pilot phase when the advisory came out to say it's advised against, and that the benefits may not be there at all, and in fact it may actually cause harm. So from that point of view, we have reviewed that, and the minister now in presenting had highlighted that we will certainly ensure that they are not utilized at any of our facilities transportation-wise. In as far as the issue of the traveling of sport bodies from one area to the other, this could be permissible considering the nature of the sports, because right now our counterparts in the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture have issued new directions that allow for non-contact sports to be played. However, those sports can still not be played in some hotspots areas that have been identified and designated. Can the can the play happen in non-hotspot areas? Certainly. Can athletes and the professional athletes that are allowed to go back to train in non-hotspot areas? Certainly, yes. So the protocols, however, of the movement of these people for that purpose is what we and the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, we can resolve between ourselves. On the issue of the plan for the PRASA commuters who may be stranded as a result of the non-availability of public transport, the reality is that it will not just be only the PRASA commuters. Lindo Gutlo will appreciate very well that other people, even during the window period that we opened when we moved from level 5 to 4, of people who were traveling between provinces to go back to their places of work, was only open for road-based travel and not necessarily other modes. And as you may know, it's quite a hardship if you were an employee working in Cape Town and you stay in Zingi, your travel in terms of road travel and in kilometers is quite strenuous. But under the current conditions, these are not normal times, and we have to weigh the rights of citizens and the right to life being sacrosanct, as the minister highlights, and that will supersede all other rights. And if indeed the danger persists that PRASA, with all its challenges and with the network that is so porous and with vandalism that is rife because the network is simply unfenced everywhere, the lines are not ready to operate, and we're not going to take a risk, even under normal circumstances, even when there is no COVID. If the line was not safe to operate on, it shouldn't be operated, and therefore the last resort would be that there would be some hardships on commuters, not just train commuters, but also commuters of other modes. Even during the time of level 5 for essential workers who always relied on buses. When buses were not available, they had to resort to taxis. Obviously, the fares between taxis and buses are not the same. One is subsidized, the other is not, and therefore the fares may have risen and hardships may have followed. So there would be, unfortunately, some degree of hardships. We will look into what is being proposed and what can be done. But PRASA itself, as we have outlined over and over, and Minister has indicated, is a broken place we are fixing with the administrator now, and we are trying to get things right. They struggle with a serious cash flow problem and are in no position to make alternative arrangements for commuters. We, however, can be responsible and open the lines that are not ready. We have to ensure that first the lines are safe, and secondly that the mitigation measures will indeed become effective. We subject all of our modes of transport to the same rigorous tests to make sure that transport does not transmit the virus. The last issue on the taxi relief fund, should I address it, Minister?
Yeah.
Okay. On the taxi relief fund, we have made tremendous progress with the National Treasury on this matter. We have briefed Santaco, and we have also briefed the National Taxi Alliance in this regard on the progress we have made. It has taken a bit of time, but as you may know, this is new territory and new ground for us. We have broken really new ground in this regard, and we have made tremendous progress in the negotiations with Treasury. We believe we have now found each other about that matter, and that the processes of intragovernmental approvals are now taking headway speed, and we will, in due course, we believe that we would be done with the Treasury by next week or so, and Minister would be in a position to then make proper announcements in this regard. But the taxi industry is briefed. What we are working on now is the modalities of this fund. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you want to say something, DM? Oh,
No, I think the DG has responded to all the questions. Yeah, thanks.
okay. Ishmael, do we have, this is the last round.
Thank you, DG. We have one caller on the line, Patrick from Fleet Watch Magazine. Over to you, Patrick.
Okay, thank you. This is a question in the minister's speech. There was not much said about the freight industry, and I take it that's because there's not much change there. However, in terms of ongoing recovery, we're now in recovery phase. Is the minister aware of the border delays, such as at Lebombo, which is now resulting over the past 2 to 3 weeks in 13-kilometer queues of trucks? And many truck companies are now taking their trucks off that route, and you're going to lose about 600 trucks from the Chrome route. I have done some chatting around, Mr. Minister, and everyone is shifting the blame. South Africa blames Mozambique. Mozambique says South Africa. This question is put in terms of now the recovery phase. These are imposed extra security checks at the border, perhaps because of illegal cigarettes and alcohol and etc. But Mr. Minister, that is going to lose this country about 150 million rand a week if the trucks pull out. Need serious attention. Do you know about that? And are you attending to that? My second question is regarding COF centers. The trucks, new trucks have been sold to essential service providers over the level 5 and level 4, but they have not been able to deliver them due to not being able to get temporary permits, as you cannot put a temporary permit on a truck unless you have a COF. Is there any possibility, Mr. Minister, of prioritizing perhaps a lane for the trucks to go through, because there are quite a few of them sitting in dealer shores not being able to be delivered, and of course with the opening, the trucks are needed on the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, DG, we have another caller, Tulasizwe from ENCA.
Okay.
Minister Mbalula, good afternoon. I have a question about your participation in a session with AKA on his new television channel. I'd like to know how that was essential government business that needed to be attended to in that manner, in person. TV channels are doing interviews remotely. That briefing you are holding there is remote, just to break the cycles of infection, to make sure that we don't have people coming to studios, and as far as possible, interviews are done remotely. Was that essential government business, in your view, to be interviewed there at that particular stage? And also, let me suggest to you, the reason why you are not being questioned about it is that actually you are enjoying male privilege. If this was Stelandabin Abrams, this would be a different conversation.
Oh, God. Okay. Can we take then WhatsApp?
Thank you, DG. Evelyn Morris from Caxton, Durban is asking, will the identification of hotspots affect transporting during the differentiated approach? Secondly, are learners going to boarding schools to be treated like other daily traveling learners? Then there's a question from Wonga Sekhai from Inkonjane FM. Can't the department at least avail buses for people who usually use trains? Trains are normally used by people from townships whom most of them cannot afford taxis. A related question on that one is from Sipho Stirman from the SABC. He's asking, why is PRASA not ready? What are the issues? And as we expect increasing number of workers to return to work, who is going to assist those who would normally use the metro rail? Diane Hawker from Newsroom Africa is asking, has there been any discussion with airlines or AXA regarding the cost of the new measures? Will airline pricing be capped or kept low to protect consumers? In this regard, is there a monitoring of prices for airlines? Can I take the last one?
Yes, that should be.
Okay.
I think we're on second round, Annie.
Yes,
This is our second round.
Yes, this is
Yeah.
okay. Nadia from Nadverfrentwendach is asking, how many people are allowed in a private vehicle?
Okay. Kobil.
I have more.
General. I don't know whether, Minister, we should take because it's supposed to be the last round. but do you want us to take more?
Just take them and answer.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Jana Marks from Netwerk 24 is asking the Minister to clarify what is the loading capacity for long distance buses. The loading capacity for city buses is limited to 50%, and those going to the airports can only carry 70%, but the capacity for long distance buses is not clear. Please clarify. Nazir from Glow TV is asking, will PVT lift clubs be allowed to transport kids or workers, and are they subjected to the same rules as public transport? Also, are traffic officers also bound to the 1.5 meter distance when stopping and questioning motorists? Leila from SABC News is asking, where are people flying for? Okay, where people are flying to Cape Town for business reasons going to stay, since hotels are not operational under lockdown level 3. Thomas from Kasi Voice is asking, how about essential workers? Let's say if you haven't seen your family since the beginning of the lockdown because you're an essential worker, then you are granted leave at work. What needs to happen? Can one travel to another province to see family if you're an essential worker who's not been able to see their family during lockdown level 3?
Thank you.
If I have 5 more, teachers.
No, I think if ministers are ready to take, okay, 5.
Okay. Evelyn Morris from Caxton Durban is asking, will the identification of hotspots affect transporting during... Okay, this answer. I did ask this question. Sorry about that. Simon Maluleke from Univen FM. As Minister is saying, 50% buses and 70% for minibuses. In some areas around Limpopo, people use one bus which pass through the area to workplaces early in the morning and return later in the evening, and it is hard to get public transport in those areas. Won't this cause some people to break the rules in that regard? Angelo from CGTN is asking, will AXA and other SOEs get government funding or guarantees? Will other domestic airlines get funding from government since they've been grounded as a result of the lockdown? Antoinette Slabert from Rapport is asking, what about the George Airport? At what levels will this airport be operational again? And what are the permit requirements to fly? How does that look? Yes, that's what I have for now. Thank you, DG.
Thank you. Minister will deploy.
I prefer DG to deal with the questions and then I come later. Operational stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Let's start with the question by Fleet Watch magazine, which is asking about the long queues of trucks at the Lubumbu border. I think generally since the beginning of lockdown, even at level 5, we have seen with the new heightened measures and also with the suspension of the permits by the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency, which are meant to facilitate quick and easy movement of cargo trucks. This has created significant delays. Are the delays necessary? Of course, the measures that have been put in place are absolutely necessary, but the delays are now seen that they are there. We have had similar delays in maritime with ships going as far as up to 50 nautical miles into the sea from the mouth of the main harbor at Durban, and we have also seen many of our borders under extreme pressure. Beitbridge too suffered a lot, and in the recent times, like last week, after Botswana imposed after it got one truck driver from South Africa who tested positive in Botswana. They then imposed a mandatory testing regime for all trucks and truck drivers coming from South Africa into any of their land borders. And with that, other truck owners have now diverted their traffic to avoid Botswana and to go, and this has also created additional pressure. Of importance is that, yes, we are not really interested in the blame game, who's who. The SADC protocol on the movement of trucks between the borders during COVID is there. Ourselves and Mozambique are both signatories to that protocol, and we are in agreement. We will not point fingers about who is not doing what they are supposed to do. But as you can see, the queue is not on our side. We are processing the trucks that need to leave our shores into the other side, but the queue is on the other side coming into here. So that should tell you the story. You should have your answer as to where the blame must lie, but we are not going to point fingers at anybody. We are aware about this. We have directed our cross-border road transport agency to deal with the matter. They have been in contact with their Mozambican counterparts, and we're also looking at cross permits. One of the things that you know is that our trucks, it's registered in South Africa, which deliver goods across SADC countries. When they enter those SADC countries, they are made to pay permits, which we to pay fees and tariffs that we are not charging ourselves. That will change. Together with the Treasury, we are working on imposing those tariffs as well to do the same thing that they are doing to South African businesses elsewhere. We are simply reciprocating. And we hope that this measure will level the playing field and ensure that we treat each other on par as neighbors in the region. On the issue of the C-off centers, we acknowledge this is a challenge, and that's why we're working hard to fast track this. And the question was, will we prioritize trucks? We will do so. We have already agreed with the Road Traffic Management Corporation, and we will add this new centers we are opening now, the DLTCs, allow also for bulk. Truck owners, dealerships that sell cars, everybody and so on, will have a fast-track lane to process permits and all what is required when they do open on the 1st. So yes, we will provide for a fast-track process to assist with the delivery of the trucks and to ensure that the trucks are permitted. And if you were asking whether we can also put a temporary thing without a CO. The regulations don't provide for that now, but we, like I'm saying, we will seek to fast track the actual issuing of permits instead of focusing on temporary permits. On the issue of the question by Sipho Sturman as to why PRASA is not ready. Infrastructure. PRASA's infrastructure and the corridors are quite porous. They are porous. They have been like this ever since they have been built. And where we have put fencing before, that fencing has been removed. It is for this reason now that during this month of June, PRASA will be going to a tender to try and close some of the corridors. We are starting with the high impact corridors that carry the most of the volumes, Mabopane to Pretoria, as well as the central line in the Cape that goes to Krisani, Kailicha, those areas, and right until Cape Town. So there we want to build high-end concrete walls, 8 meter high, with all the security that's necessary to make sure that it is a deterrent for anybody first to enter the rail reserve, but secondly it's also a deterrent for anybody to try. Such a wall you can't steal. If it's bricks, we have seen with Sanral that on the N1 there next to Carousel, Hammanskral, that brick, people break it brick by brick and they go. You can even see the houses there at Marukulung. Some of them are built with exactly the same bricks that have been taken from the wall that separate cars, and you can imagine the danger of and how many derailments have happened as a result of things that are put on the rail reserve. So that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. With it, it will provide for protection of essential infrastructure within the corridor, which is critical to safety and to safe operation of trains. Signaling systems, the pairways to ensure that derailments don't happen, electrical equipment which is being stolen by syndicates for copper. We will seek to protect that, and I think that's the biggest reason why PRASA is not ready. There's been huge vandalism of the corridors that were identified, and we are looking now at addressing that once and for all. Will we cap the airline prices? We aren't at that stage yet, but what we know is that the airlines have indicated that if we do not consider favorably their operations, including operational times, they may have to review the situation. We have agreed with them that from day of operation, once they start operating and the aircrafts are in the sky and passengers are booking, we will again meet with them in 2 weeks' time to do a re-evaluation and an assessment. Should the need arise for them to do so, we will ask our economic regulator, which is the Economic Regulation Committee for Aviation, to work with us and the economists to assist us in as far as the determination of what then the likely prices could be. Then at that stage, it's only then we can talk about the possibility of capping the prices or not, and we can also request on a voluntary basis the Competition Commission to look at whether the prices are within the necessary range or not. Will the learners that are going to boarding school be treated the same way as learners who travel daily? Certainly no. I think they would need just a one-way permit to go to school for the duration they're going to stay at boarding school. And those that travel daily, there is a separate arrangement with basic education by which school principals can be able to stamp a form and give to the learners confirming that they are learners at that school. That is what can be utilized on a day-to-day basis. Nadia of News 24 and Jana are asking about the loading capacity of buses for long distances. That loading capacity is at 50%. For buses. That's where it is at. During the window that we had opened for interprovincial travel from level 5 to 4, we had allowed for a loading capacity of 70%. But the challenge with buses is that the configuration is never exactly the same. And if you were to compare a BRT bus where standing capacity is much more higher than the sitting capacity, and you were to contrast that between a Greyhound bus as an example or a Translux, that would give you a different configuration in terms of the seating arrangements. And therefore the issues of the compulsory 1.2 meter distancing of passengers becomes the key issue depending on what the seat configuration is. And therefore the safest loading capacity comes at 50%, considering the different configurations that are there. Will the private lift labs be allowed to operate, and will the rules be applicable to them? Yes, they should. They can operate. However, the rules apply to them. The same rules that apply to minibus taxis and to every other form of configuration of transportation comes into being, and that will be applicable to them as well. And therefore, should they be found that they have packed children like sardines, the law will take its course. The traffic officers are not immune to COVID-19. 1.5 meter rule also is applicable to them. And those that do not comply with that rule, motorists are free to report them to the hotline of the RTMC so that their matters can be investigated. But certainly, the 1.5 meter rule is applicable to them. And shortly hereafter, they will also not just be checking your license and disc and that. They'll also be checking your temperature and screening as part of the bigger cohort of what we are doing. Leila is asking about flying to Cape Town. Where will accommodation be found? The intent here is for a business meeting and for you to go in and out because accommodation in level 3, remember we are talking limited domestic travel. This is not a free-for-all. The regulations are quite clear that travel for leisure, for business, and that is not allowed. And that answers the question of Thomas from Kasi Voice, who's asking whether to travel to see family members is allowed, unless the members are seeking medical advice, and maybe it's your old grandmother who needs support and assistance, and you are the only person who can assist and who can do the work, then so be it. But generally, you would need to apply for a permit, and you would need to follow the regulations as they are there in this regard. There's been a question about the lack of transport in rural areas, and therefore in towns where one bus goes to town and wait and then comes back with the same people back there. If you say 50% loading capacity, it takes half the people, and how do the other half of the people end up going to work? Yeah, this is a challenge. It is because there is reduced capacity of vehicles in terms of their loading capacity, and therefore that will remain a challenge that we're looking at. Does it mean that other new players can come into the space to fill in the vacuum? Certainly yes. And are we ready as the Department of Transport to issue temporary permits during these lockdown levels to support new players to enter and to take up the shortfall? Certainly we are ready for that, and we would be issuing temporary permits to that extent. The question pertaining to the funding and guarantee that we should give for airlines, we aren't giving any, as the Department of Transport, any guarantees of funding. The funding must be sourced from the funds that the state has created as relief funds and as business support funds for purposes of this, including for airlines and all other enterprises in our economy, including those that operate in the transport space. We are ready, obviously, as the Department of Transport, to provide additional support to any of our operators that seek assistance to access this funding, and we would be able to put in a good word for them. What level will George Airport operate in? Level 1. That is when we arrive to level 1, all the remaining smaller airports, including Vanderboom, Hoedspruit, and all of them that we have not done anything, including those that run private landing strips, Pilanesberg, and so on. All of those ones will come in at level 1. This has always been envisaged and planned in that way. Should the need arises, and should the infection curve flatten faster and so on, we may review the situation. But however, as it is per plan, it's in level 1. And what permit will we issue to that effect? The same operating permit that we normally issue for things to operate that will operate as such. I don't know whether I've missed anything, but I believe I've covered everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First, I think we need to answer the question about PRASA. When COVID-19 visited us, we were in the process, and we're still in the process of rebuilding PRASA to be a formidable force. And we have taken decisions with regard to PRASA to ensure that we've got intervention there. Under normal circumstances, if PRASA was a well-oiled machinery, we wouldn't be asking many questions about its viability and its capacity to deliver in times of COVID-19. But we know that we've got challenges of congestion. We've got a whole lot of challenges that, in terms of the safety measures, if we don't pay attention to that, we will run a service that will simply become a transmitter. And we are not ready to do that. We can do it by tomorrow and run it and all of that, but it's not going to answer to what we want to achieve as a nation and the tasks we have set for ourselves, and what transport has been asked to do to play a part in the reduction, informed by the overarching strategy of readjusted risk and then also phased-in approach. So we believe, based on our own work and our own assessment, we're not hands-off. I mean, we are hands-on in terms of PRASA, and based on that assessment, we came to a conclusion that we can only open rail services from the 1st of July, which is what we'll do. And we are quite impressed equally about the work that has been done. But we must also hasten to mention that the PRASA rail network has been looted left and right, and with some of the regulations that we introduced affected the work that was being done in terms of refurbishment, new construction the DG was talking about to protect the rail network, because work came to a standstill. But at level 3, that work is going to continue. At level 4, that work is continuing. And the beefing up of PRASA, addressing issues of governance and the necessary capacity of men and women with knowledge and capacity to run PRASA to be something that is supposed to be a railway service at the disposal of the people of South Africa, run by efficient brains of men and women who've got the capacity to run that particular place, technical know-how and all of that. Just yesterday we introduced, we saw that they finished the employment of top executives. That place was depleted to the ground, and that is why it's characterized by the new administrator, to quote him, as a broken place. So we are very confident that that service will come to play. We don't want to risk the workers. At the same time, there are people who are working there. We've got many people who are affected by COVID-19 at PRASA, and also in the rail sector as we speak. So we can't risk our people and workers coming to work at the same time, not protected and all of that. So the work that has been done, evaluated, will take us to the 1st of July and we'll be able to open up for this particular service. The point about relief fund, we have said in the beginning, is worth repeating. In principle, government have agreed to support financially the taxi industry. And what we are dealing with now, just to amplify, is the modalities. Yesterday, I briefed the taxi industry about that. And in the next coming weeks, we'll come back once those modalities are finalized to basically address that. Of course, the taxi industry is hard hit, like all other industries. The bus industry also, those who are not beneficiaries of the subsidy. Yesterday, I had a long discussion with the bus industry and about the measures of relief they themselves qualify for, that have been announced by the president. But the taxi industry is hard hit, particularly in long distance. It's been totally shut down. And those are issues we are attending to, and that we're looking at as to what needs to be done to alleviate the situation of the industry, which is very important for us. We are happy overall with maritime. We are happy. We are happy with aviation, 100% happy. The devil is in the detail in terms of implementation. From Monday onwards, we'll be looking at operations. It doesn't mean on Monday, probably the first flight will take off. There are processes. Monday is the first. It means aviation, domestic flights are open but limited. We have explained to you which are the lines that are going to be open. Even in that travel of the domestic limited service, it does not mean it's wonke. Everybody is free to fly up and down. It's business. You can fly to Cape Town, but where will you sleep? So business, you will fly and do all of that, but we will ramp up because this is a process of opening up the industries. Remember what the president said and the advice we got also from the scientists, because this process is driven by scientific, support. They said, shut down like everybody, but when you open up, don't open like you shut down. When we shut down, we said on this day, within 72 hours, the president announced, wherever you are, stop. We're no longer moving. But when we open up, we can't do that. That's why we adopted a phased-in approach from 5 up to level 1. But we forget quickly, and we fight over things like cigarette and insult people like Minister Nkosazana for cigarette and then for alcohol. We fight over those things because but we arrest them every day with drunken driving during the lockdown. So many drunkards we arrest here. Where do they get the alcohol? They are getting it underground. We know all the features of alcohol ban. What does it mean? Alcohol, what it does to us, we know. But we equally know economically what alcohol does to the economy, equally with cigarette. And we know all the ills of alcohol. We know that South Africa is not a country that can be like other countries where there is total alcohol ban. There are people and groups who advocate for total alcohol ban, but it won't happen in our country. It won't. That's why it is regulated, but in how it is consumed by our people is what must be controllable. COVID-19 is a good story for alcohol consumers. We know that we are a nation of alcohol abusers. Asibuki siyabul. You don't leave a place till they say siyavala manje. You go all out, with your money, buying, abusing. And you don't have to do that. You just have to have it nice. Nice, and go. They undermine the law, they drink and drive, they produce fatalities. It's a mess. Now, alcohol must be controllable. Now, we say alcohol is available from this day to Thursday. It's not Nkosazana's decision. It's government decision. It's not Nkosazana's decision that cigarette is banned. You may not like it because you are a cigarette smoker, but we are told that cigarette DG, you want this there, you will clarify that issue. It's an important issue which we must clarify because they are asking a question about airlines. So DG will clarify. Now it's disturbing my flow because I'm explaining this. Because cigarette, other people don't like it. And industry players, people who make money out of smokers, out of people smoking, don't like it. Now we say no smoking because we are told this invincible enemy, it affects respiratory organs. And cigarette will be the biggest, faster contributor to death. And that is why it's discouraged. Simple. You disagree with that, go and argue with the scientists. They themselves are not even sure 100% what is this coronavirus. Who are we to argue with them? I can sit here and argue with Professor Dr. Karim. President Ramaphosa did not change overnight and change from Ramaphosa, the politician, the president of the country, to a virologist or a epidemiologist and become this big guy who wants to argue with scientists. No! He has kept the distance and allowed them through Dr. Zweli Mkhize to advise government on these issues. Now, when they argue among themselves and they don't maintain the decorum, they are affecting the fight. It's not good that Glenda fights with so and so, does not agree. It does not amuse us. We want them to come to us and advise government. I can't feature even an op-ed on that discussion. I don't qualify because it needs scientists. Our approach is scientifically driven. We were told, otherwise, if it was us, according to us, we would have opened up. They say it in other countries. Why do you open up the economy when the spike is going up? We never said that flattening means that coronavirus will not come. We said when it comes, it is going to come. President Ramaphosa said that on no uncertain terms, that the worst is yet to come. How can we forget so quick? But when it comes, it must find us ready. Whether or not the places of worship to open, it is right or wrong, it is something that is not cast in stone. Nothing in coronavirus, including its regulations, are cast in stone. This is not an emergency to oppress people, to showcase that government is strong, the state have showcased its capacity. We are able to deal with things quicker and faster. People don't have water, we've been able to deliver quick and fast, thanks to coronavirus. And these are things that we must run with going forward. But at the end of the day, nothing is cast in stone. If government makes a mistake by opening up churches and all of that, and so on, and churches themselves are saying we are retreating, it is the churches that say so. And a good contribution to the fight against coronavirus, and we actually appreciate that particular point. So we've got a plan of where we are heading to, and at the same time, that plan is a plan of working together with everybody in relation to the fight against coronavirus. So we are one in terms of the Department of Transport. We are fine with public transport, the taxis. I know our people are complaining that taxis are doing overload. Some of them, they undermine 70%, but we're still there. It is 70%. At some point, we are going to come to interrogate 100%. Sis Pumla, we did come with 100%. And we were gobbled up by the taxi industry, by our people. No, you can't. And indeed, we can't. We couldn't, because there's no science in that. And when we went to scientists, they said, you are undermining social distance. Social distance is difficult. But now, putting on a mask in a taxi and meeting with people, it's very difficult to use this mask, because some of us and many others have bad breath. So once you put this thing, you meet it face to face, the bad breath, yeah. You see, and it's not nice to put on a mask, but we've got to put it on. The mask has got to be on. When you meet people and mask and all of that with bad breath, because it is sickness and all of that, but the mask has got to be on, because if it is not on, I'm going to affect Alec, I'm going to affect medical lady this side. Now, when you speak and you meet with people, you've got to get all the time to defend yourself, like I'm speaking now. DG's mask is on. The deputy minister's mask is on, because I'm speaking. Once you start speaking, I run. Mask on. It's got to be on. The mask has got to be on. There is a reason for that mask to be on. So it's mandatory. So it does not mean anything. We are told it must. So everybody, I've been to the townships. I've been to the suburbs. I've seen people shopping with their masks on. I've seen them running with a mask. I can imagine how it is to run with a mask on. But they run with their mask, they comply, they are on point. They know, like we know, that it is not for me, it's not to please government, it's for my safety. It's for my safety and it's for your safety. It's not to make government feel good that we are complying. And government must not abuse equally. We must not abuse our people. And that is why we talk to our people all the time. And my last point I wish to raise, which was raised by the journalist Tula Sizwe. I think Tula Sizwe's question is both mischievous and sensational. It is mischievous in the sense that he himself is a journalist, is asking a question, why was the question not asked? He's got all the rights to ask the question. But he says that the question is not asked deliberately because of certain circumstances that he defines. But he's incorrect, because he's got all the right, like he asked now, which you will know that in terms of the regulations, media is an essential. We've been going up and down with the media, not only with visual. I've been with the media everywhere, and maintaining social distance and observing the protocols everywhere. But media is essential. Secondly, he knows that if I had, he is mischievous. He knows that if I had broken the rules, he doesn't have to make me a favor. He must take me on, and I'm challenging him to take me on the regulations that I've broken by going for a television interview. Which regulation have I broken? Because I've gone to studio for people who conducted an interview, and of which production houses have been allowed to produce films, people to go back to work. That's why the Fergusons and the Queen and all of that, I'm sorry, Generations and all of that, because we're on SABC, are back because production houses are back. So that is it. So I responded to an interview to ask me, was it work or what? I mean, really sensational. He basically wants people to attack me, to lampoon me, to loot me, to vandalize me, and then I must follow Stella. President must suspend me because I did something irregular. Yes, if I'm doing something irregular or whatever that is the case, everybody will follow the line. Now, he asked this question when I'm here to clarify people about transport measures. So, Sis Pumla, I have to respond to that, to say to him that he knows the regulations. And if there are regulations that have been broken by my appearance and accepting an interview by a show, production house, then he should raise that particular issue with the authorities. There is a police station surely not far away from ENCA studios. He can march there, or he can at the same time come to me and ask me, and not wait for a special occasion to divert the whole nation, to focus on something else, you know, and that is not the point. So I'm characterizing it as both mischievous and at the same time sensational in a way. We are ready with level 3 on Monday, and we want to thank our people and industries, and we work very hard through the Twitter account. And don't cut me, I needed to clarify that man. Tula Sizwe is very important because he asked the question. So that is it. Now, we are ready with everything. DG, I don't know, you had something very important that was asked to you that you needed to clarify for the service to our people, DM. We are ready to answer questions in the social networks. We will be going to the airport to showcase to you how the safety measures will apply. We are consulting with the industry all the time. We are improvising. My last point, is about the sanitizers and all of that, the booths. I went to Gautrain, and Gautrain said, the CEO explained, Mr. Dex, that we are doing a testing of this, and we want to check whether it is effective or not. That is the tunnel, the booth. So there's never been anybody contracted by the department or any of our entities. And our colleagues in Gauteng also went to and I also went to Rea Vaya. They intended to install these tunnels. And I must say that on my Twitter, hey, I've never seen so many entrepreneurs with brains who are able to do this. So they must move from tunnels. Now they've had. Tunnels are illegal. Move to something. Bring some innovation. We need innovation that we will implement at all times in the fight against coronavirus in places like train stations, in places like airports, where you don't have to stand in a queue. You just go sanitize your hands and pass. That's what we need. We need innovation. So even to myself, these booths, they look, like Magoya, real stuff. But now Pudzweli Mkhize, the doctor, and who they say those things are illegal. But we don't have a tender at Transport for booths. DG was doing his own investigation about whether they will work with health. Now the order has come. They can't work. Okay? And then even in Gauteng, as far as I'm concerned, but there are other industry players like in malls. I've seen certain malls have already instituted these tunnels. But like DG says, we use everything. So if we are advised discontinue, that will be discontinued. We'll look in a different direction for things that will actually work as we combine and intensify our fight against coronavirus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
I
Minister.
want you to clarify that question that I thought it's important.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, DG. There was a inquiry, not an inquiry, actually an alert that the headlines of ENCA are actually suggesting that we have opened international airports. This may be misleading to international airlines because they will start now making inquiries about whether they can fly to South Africa or not. I think that headline needs to be corrected to say for domestic purposes so that it's quite clear. Otherwise, we are just creating an unnecessary influx of calls and work for our entities.
Thank you very much, DG.
No, DG, the international refers to our yeah. So they must correct that ENCA because in phase 2, international local airports, let's teach them. International Limpopo, international Bramfisher, international. So they must understand we don't mean international airlines. They are not operations, only domestic. So they just had international and then they rushed into that. Let them correct that because it will be misleading. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of this media briefing. Our next media briefing is on tourism at 6 o'clock. We adjourn. Thanks.
Uyandibetha apha lo mfana uyandikhezelela ngabo ngento ayaziyo ukuthi